Hello there, I'm Ken Loggins here once again with another visit here on Home Folks. Before we get to our guest today, I want to remind you, subscribe to the YouTube channel, first chance you get, Ken Loggins Online on YouTube. Also follow us on Facebook, Ken Loggins Online on Facebook as well. Best way to keep up with the visits that we do and when new visits are going to drop, those two resources for you, the YouTube channel and Facebook. And I'm honored to welcome to the microphone Mr. Paul Gray Miller today. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I just got through running my morning run this morning, had a little breakfast.
You got 3 miles in?
Yes, sir. I've run usually 3 1/10 miles, and I'm getting prepared for a 4-miler in Batesville's coming up in a couple of weeks. So I'm trying to build up to a 4-mile morning, and I'm within a half a mile of that right now. I'll be all right with it, I think.
You've been an athlete all your life, but when did you catch the running bug? Do you remember that specifically?
Yes.
I'm sure Gene probably twisted
Yes.
your arm, your son Gene.
Yeah, Gene started doing it, and I got interested in it, and I started walking. First, I gradually went into it, having studied physical education and health in my earlier days. I knew not to just jump out there the first day and say, I'm going to run 2 or 3 miles and come back, because you don't do that. And so I started walking just a normal pace, and then I upped it to a little brisk, and then pretty soon I was walking about 2 or 3 miles, and I would run a quarter of a mile or a half a mile, and wasn't long till I was up to running 3 miles, and 3.1 is a 5K, and that's what Gene and I usually enter is 5K runs. I do run 3 miles and sometimes 4.
When you talk about Paul Gray Miller, it might be easier to talk about what he hasn't done in his life, because in his earlier years, you think a teacher, you think a coach, eventually businessman, very successful businessman, state senator. You were born in 1937, February the 26th. You were born, I believe, in a cabin, correct?
Log cabin here in town.
The approximate location of that cabin in Melbourne.
It was west of Melbourne. It was in town, but not downtown.
Okay.
And log house not too far from Mill Creek, west of town here. And my sister Jean, by the way, was born 2 years before me in that same log house. I went back to visit that one time when I was in high school, just out of curiosity to go see where I was born. And the Dowdle family lived in that house, and they had a picture of it, and they gave it to me. It's not real clear, but it's a picture where you can tell it's a log house, and there was a couple of fellows sitting out on the front porch fisting and smoking a pipe, corncob pipe. And of course that was after I was born, but I wasn't still living in it then, I'm sure.
Now, you were the baby of the bunch, weren't you? You
Yes.
had Miss Nora Ann came along, and then, as you said, Sister Jean, and then you, a couple of years later, your parents, Robert Gray and Noby. What about your grandparents?
My mother's mom and dad I never knew, because they both died fairly young, and so I never did know them. But my grandpa Marchant, his name was Oscar Marchant. My grandmother was named Nora Kansas Davidson before she married. Mm-hmm. So we're kin to so many people, and we're kin to the Davidsons. My grandmother died, and he remarried. He married a lady by the name of Maud Meeker. Mm-hmm. And together they had 3 children. On the Millers, my grandmother Miller gave birth to 12 children, and my grandfather his name was Green Hightower Miller, mm-hmm. and he went by G.H. Miller. And one of their many, many sons was named G.H. Miller Jr. He was next to the youngest. And the oldest one was Lowell Miller, and he was born just about a year and 8 months before my dad was, Robert Gray Miller. They called him Bob. My dad served in the Army during World War II, and then December the 16th, 1944, my dad was in a real bad fight against the German army, and they had us outnumbered terribly bad. They'd made a surprise attack on us, and it was called the Battle of the Bulge. But lots of movies have been made about that. Mm-hmm. That morning, Dad was an ammunition carrier, and he was carrying ammunition to the people in a bunker that had a regular cannon they were shooting at the Germans with. A large bullet hit near him in a pine tree, and the concussion killed him instantly. The good part about it, he never knew what hit him. One of his mates in the Army wrote Mother. Mother wrote a lot of people trying to find out what happened, and one of the guys wrote and said he held Dad in his arms while he passed. And
wow. Now, have you ever had a chance to go overseas and visit that battlefield?
Yes. My son Gene and I went. I was in the car business at the time, and we used to win trips from selling more vehicles, and that was one of the big ones. And Treva had a fear of flying at the time and wouldn't go, and my partner Weldon Campbell had also a fear of flying, so he left it up to me, and he said, "You go ahead and take the trip." And so Gene, of course, he loved trips and loved flying, and so he went with me, and we flew into Paris, and then we covered a lot of ground over in Germany. The sad thing about all that was that in January of 1945, we got a telegram from the office of the military. Mother got this telegram and told her that Dad had been missing in action since December the 21st. Well, that was all we heard about it, and Mother got down a list of Dad's friends. She wrote hundreds of letters to those guys that we assumed had lived through it and got home in America. Some of them did not. Some of them were taken prisoner and died in prison, and some of the others were killed in the battle, like my father was. But anyway, we didn't hear from the government anything from January until August of 1945. And at that point, we got a letter from the United States Army. And the letter, I have that letter, and it tells Mother that Dad was killed in action. And in 1940, I think it was 1947 or 8, Mother had the Army to bring his body back, and we had a burial here in the Melbourne cemetery. I've always had doubts about whether that was really my father or not in the coffin, because it took so long. All those months we knew nothing, and suddenly in August we get a letter saying they know what happened to him. But in 1994, I decided I was going to find out if it was possible what happened to my father. And so I got Mother's list that she had and went over it. I just started using the telephone, and I'd get these numbers and call people that were with him or I thought would be him. Well, bingo, I found one, and he was with him the day Dad got killed. He was taken prisoner and lived through that and had got back to his home up and around Chicago, Illinois. So we talked on the phone quite a bit, and he wanted to meet me real bad, and I wanted to meet him as bad. We had one another trip to go, I think, over to the East Coast. And so I made arrangements with the aircraft company that we would have a layover in Chicago, Illinois. And I was able to make that arrangement for my wife, Treva, and I. We were lucky to have that visit with him, and he told us that he remembered my dad quite well.
And that has to give you as much closure as you're going to get in this lifetime, an event like that happened about 50 years later. This was post D-Day, the Battle of the Bulge, and lots of folks might think, well, post D-Day, it was a rout for the Allies. A lot of lives still lost, a lot of tough fighting after D-Day, Battle of the Bulge included. An event like that, with a family back home, it's going to galvanize you. You're going to have a lot of support from fellow family members. I always remember your mother, such a small woman in stature, but how strong she was to continue to lead that family through such a traumatic time.
We had a huge garden. The government had a very small pension that Mother drew for each child that which she had. And so the three of us drew, of course, it went to Mother for until we became 18 years old. And it wasn't much, but back then anything was big to us.
Sure.
We didn't, for a long time, Mother didn't have a job working away from the home, and we raised chickens and sold them in town, and we had a milk cow, and we sold milk in town, and had a huge garden and everything. After Dad got killed, Mother moved us and our kids over to a house right next door to my grandparents. So it was so-called so they could kind of watch after me, little Paul Gray, because I was kind of a rounder, I was just a small kid. But I don't think they ever could catch up with me too much. My first career in the business world was when I was about something like 6 or 7 years old.
Now, you talked a while ago about how you were a rounder, you said. Now, does that mean, did you like school or did you just tolerate school?
I just kind of tolerated it. I loved the other kids, though. I always loved people, and I loved the other kids, that I knew at school.
Well, tell me about this small business venture you started. I mean, literally a small business venture, yeah.
I was delivering the Grit. That was a newspaper called the Grit. Most people that will hear this will have never heard of the Grit. But it was a newspaper that I delivered. I didn't even have to ride a bicycle. I would just walk down. We lived in a house about 2 blocks from the courthouse. And by the way, the courthouse was still gravel then all the way around it. And I would walk down and I'd go in the pool hall, and I think they felt sorry for me enough they'd buy my Grit paper from me. It was just a nickel, but a nickel then would buy a full package of candy. I mean, all you'd want for one day. And I'd go in the restaurants and all through the courthouse, and they'd all buy one from me. They were a nickel, and I had to send that. I got to keep 1 penny out of that nickel. And so you'd be surprised how that built up, because I was saving that to maybe buy me a bicycle someday and maybe a baseball glove or whatever I could with it. And then when I got a little older and got me a bicycle, the Arkansas Gazette was a morning newspaper. The Arkansas Democrat was a late afternoon newspaper. Mm-hmm. I don't know why it landed this way, but Mother always took the Arkansas Gazette. And a guy lived somewhere else would bring them to Melbourne in his pickup truck, and he would leave them down at Fred Blankenship's drugstore, and maybe some of them in the pool hall. And then everybody that wanted a paper knew where they'd be, and they went in and bought them. I think 10 or 15 cents then. Anyway, it came to pass that the Arkansas Gazette management decided that if this guy could throw the paper, they'd sell a lot more of them. And so he started doing that with his truck, but he wasn't happy with it. I guess he was quitting the Gazette because somehow or another I got wind that they were going to try to get somebody to deliver it. And I got the job. Mm-hmm. and delivered it on my bicycle all over town. And I started making more than just spending money, I'd keep it and then buy a baseball or a bat or a glove or something, mm-hmm. Or another basketball. I had the outdoor court, the only one in town. My Uncle J.D. Marchant and Uncle Melvin Womack had felt sorry for me, and I had a little old goal fixed on a pole where Mother hung out the washing. and dried. It was about 6 feet tall, you know. But I'd found an old piece of metal that was circular. I don't know where I got it, what it was about, but I've shoot on that. Well, they come and built me a goal, exactly the right height and everything, with posts up, 2 posts on each side. So I had the town basketball court. And of course, pretty soon I became pretty good at shooting basketball.
Sure.
You know,
that's how it all started, probably.
That's how it all started.
Yeah,
I just lived out there on that court by myself usually, but we'd try to get a whole gang and play 3-on-3 or something, you know.
Sure.
Sometimes.
And I've always wondered this, Paul Gray. Where did you pick up your lifetime love for the Dodgers? Probably started when they were in Brooklyn, didn't it?
Yes. There was a guy named Elwin Rowe, and they called him Preacher Rowe.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. He was a left-handed pitcher, really skinny guy, nearly as skinny as I was back then. And he signed with, I believe it was Pittsburgh Pirates. I think that's who it was he originally signed with. And but they traded him off, and he ended up with the Brooklyn Dodgers somehow. But meanwhile, in the winter months, he was teaching school in Melbourne High School. Now, I was too young to even know about any of that then. I was down in grade school. But my uncles, John Miller and G.H. Miller, were in high school when he was teaching. Preacher he became real popular with these Melbourne people. Mm-hmm. And later on, when he signed with the Brooklyn Dodgers, along about 1948, I got to pay attention to baseball. And we played baseball every Saturday afternoon at a baseball field that the boys and I had built with rocks for bases and whatever we could do.
Whatever works.
And whatever worked. And it was on the Nick's Grice place. Mr. Grice owned that up there, and he and his family lived not far from where that park was. And we had a deal made where the ditch was beyond the outfield out there, and if you hit it in the ditch, it was automatic double. Well, there was a fence just on the ground just past that ditch, and if you hit it over the fence, it was a home run. Mm-hmm. And there's a fellow named Roddy Harris, who was a brother to T.J. Harris, lived in that first house. And I knew that somebody was going to hit that ball and knock one of his windows out one of these days. And when he did, we were going to probably have our ball game quit. Mm-hmm. Well, some of those boys, besides myself, was Jim Haley and his brother John Haley. Of course, Mickey Grice, that was Nick Grice's grandson. Darius Stubbs and Arlie Stubbs. Y.D. Whitehurst and his brother James Whitehurst. Troy Sarton. And a Finley boy that became my best friend, and they moved away, and I just about cried when they left. His name was David Finley, and his nickname, everybody had nicknames back then. His was Poochie. Mm-hmm. Poochie and I we were just the same size. We could have wore each other's clothes and everything, and we were just really close buddies. I think he was in the 8th or 9th grade when they moved out of there, and they moved to Piggott, Arkansas. And I hardly ever saw him anymore after that. But his grandmother still lived there at Melbourne in a house not far from where we lived on that same hill. And occasionally they would come back over on a Sunday, and I'd get to visit with him. And when we moved to Jonesboro, he was still at Piggott and had gone through school there and was working there. And he drove over to Jonesboro and visited with us a couple of times. But anyway, we would have those baseball games, and boy, we really had a lot of fun with that. And finally, one day, one of the guys hit one that knocked out one of the...
You knew it was going to happen eventually.
Yeah, I knew it was going to finally happen. And it knocked out one of the Harris guys' windows. Oh, man, that scared us all. So what they did, they elected me to go tell him, when he got in for work, because I lived, right close. And of course, Mickey Grice did too, but they didn't elect him. They elected me. So I go over there, hat in hand, and was real seriously sad. I told him, I said, I don't have any money much, but I'll try to get money from Mother and pay you for that window. He said, Sonny boy, I'm just tickled to death that you boys are playing ball out there instead of going and getting in some meanness somewhere. And he said, I'll fix it myself, and you keep playing ball right out there.
Okay.
And so I reported back to my teammates, and we all had a celebration at home plate. We got to keep on doing that.
Now, your class there at Melbourne Elementary, it grew quite a bit because of consolidation, didn't it?
I think there was about 14 or 15 of us that started together in the first grade and graduated together. Mm-hmm. Our school consolidated when I was about the 5th grade, I think it was. And that's when the Zion people came to school with us. They had a school at Zion, Lunenburg, mm-hmm. Sage, Larkin and Lafferty, and Bellevue. And there's a school called Red Hill out toward Knob Creek. And when all those came to our school, and I was in the 5th grade, we couldn't get all of us in a classroom because there was 51 of us in the 5th grade all of a sudden. I remember Mr. Leslie Cooksey, he was our homeroom teacher. And so he had us all in this room, and he was counting us, and we didn't have about 25 chair desks. So most of us were standing around in the room wondering what they were going to do with us. And so they finally split us up into 2 rooms, and we had originally about 25 to each room. Now, as the school term went along, some of those moved away or went to school somewhere else, and we didn't end up with near that many. But I have a picture in our Melbourne school yearbook. I have that, and it has a picture of those 5th graders in there, 51 of us that started. Mm-hmm. The biggest class it ever had. And then when we graduated in 54, there was 34 of us graduated, and that was the largest graduation class up until that time. I got just crazy as I could be about basketball. Anthel Marlin had moved in as our new coach. Anthel had what he called a tryout. And so he had all the boys in their class to come to the gymnasium one day for one period. And he threw us basketballs around, watched us throw it and catch it. And he threw some to us, let us go in for a layup shot and things. And, of course, none of us could do much. We never had played. Whoever made that team got to come to basketball practice instead of going to the study hall one period. And the only 2 that he gave that privilege to was Jimmy Gaston from out at Zion and myself. Mm-hmm. And so we thought we had become the athletic wonders of the world. We were both about real small guys. I was small until I just didn't get to growing and get tall until I was in about the 12th grade. I was just a little short, sawed-off guy. But anyway, we got to play some, and then when we got in the 7th grade, we both he gave us a suit, and we were on the junior high team. Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure if there might have been one more out of our class on that, but I can't remember there being.
Well, a bit later on during your high school playing days, you would find yourself right smack dab in the middle of, more than a few epic basketball games. We're going to hear about a few of those when we continue on the other side of the break. You're listening to Home Folks. I'm Ken Loggins with our very special guest, Paul Gray Miller. We're back before you know it. Stay close. Lots more of our conversation with Paul Gray Miller here on Home Folks coming up shortly. Right now, I want to remind you, I really appreciate it when you do business with our Home Folks partners. like Mike Watson, State Farm Insurance, with locations in Highland and Melbourne, and everywhere online at talktomikewatson.com. Townsend Spice and Supply, 725 East Main in Melbourne, serving you since 1978, specializing in custom spice blends, herbs, and seasoning. Mill Creek Monuments in Melbourne, family owned and operated. Call 870-291-7833. Cooper's Hawk Golf Course and the Hawk's Nest Grill in Melbourne. Cooper's Hawk ranked number 1 in Arkansas for 3 years straight. Come and play, come and stay. And by Future Fuel Chemical Company in Batesville, leading the way in the manufacture of specialty chemicals and biofuels. This is Home Folks, Part 1 of our visit with Paul Gray Miller. One of my favorite things is hearing ball game stories. And since we're doing this visit in 2 parts, we have plenty of time. Paul Gray, I wanted to devote an entire segment to some of those big game memories from your high school basketball days. I know you have plenty of them. Let's talk about a few of those games that you still remember like they happened yesterday.
Yeah, what happened was all the way through the 11th grade, through junior high and into the 10th and 11th grade, I always was on the team, but Ansel Marlin, for some reason or another, he didn't put me in the game very much. Ansel was a big promoter, probably a better promoter than he was actually a technical coach. But anyway, he scheduled a game with a team from Batesville, and we carried a piano from the high school library or wherever it was, and we carried that piano over to the gym for that game that night because we were told that these kids would play the piano and do some dancing at halftime. I tell you, they couldn't play a bit of basketball, but they sure could dance.
It was worth the price of admission there. Everybody was entertained.
Jimmy Gaston and I were in the 10th grade, and Harrisdale Walker, Jimmy Miller, Royce Jean Walker, they were 12th graders. The game started, and you could see right quick that those boys from Batesville just never had played basketball much. Mm-hmm. And wasn't going to be much competition for us. And so Ansel called timeout. Jimmy Gaston and I, we'd been sitting on the bench as our normal thing. And he said, Paul Gray, you and Jim, you're going in the game. So we nervously went over to the scorekeeper and were registered to go in the ball game. And on the way out to the center before they was going to jump the ball, I said, Jim, how come he's put us in this game? He said he's got the idea of Harrisdale breaking the scoring record for most points in a game. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said he wants us to throw the ball to him. And he said, Jim Miller and Roy Jean will want to shoot it once in a while. And he said he knows that we'll do what he said. I said, well, we'll do it. Yeah. So we just would get the ball and throw it to Harrisdale, and he'd jump and put it in the hole. And I think he made 91 points.
My goodness.
It wasn't a game. It was a complete farce is what it was.
So you have a 91-point game, and you have piano playing and dancing at halftime. I mean, that had to be the most epic night of basketball that Izard County ever saw.
Yeah, it was the show of the century, I tell you.
Well, you said he was a promoter. I mean, he was a very good promoter. Yeah, obviously.
Yeah. After that, he decided that we had some pretty fast guys on the basketball team. So he thought maybe we might win a track meet if we'd go to a track meet. Now, we didn't have televisions, and so we'd never seen a track meet on TV or any other way, so we knew nothing except they do run, and see who can run the fastest. Mm-hmm. So he got us into a track meet at Ball Knob, Arkansas. Well, I went along with the guys, but I didn't practice any running with them, and I wasn't planning on running with them. Well, Robert Hamilton, one of my best buddies, he was on the basketball team with us, and I'll tell another story about that before we get through, about a basketball game we had. Anyway, Ansel decided Robert had those long legs and he probably could run that mile race, and do pretty good. Well, so we go down to Ball Knob and they shoot the gun and Robert takes off around that round track. And boy, he's got that big nose in the air, and he's run off and smoked those other guys. He's done left them all behind. And we're all up there cheering for him. And there's some guys from some big school, I suppose they're from Little Rock or somewhere like that. I don't know. But one of them said to me, he said, "You're from Melbourne?" I said, "Yeah, I'm with them." Said, "Well, who is that guy that's running so fast?" And I said, "Well, that's Robert Hamilton, but we calls him Grease because he's faster than Grease Lightning." He said, "Well, can he make it 4 times around the track at that speed?" I said, 4 times? I said, "Lord, no." So one of the guys ran down to the track as Robert was coming around. Of course, he was way ahead of everybody. And told him, said, "Robert, you got to run 3 more times." See, he ran around and stopped. He thought he'd won the race. And he said, "The blankety blank you say." He said, "I can't run around just 3 more times." And so I run down there and I said, "Grease, just go ahead and walk if you have to. They said you'll get a ribbon if you finish, no matter how light you are." So he walked and he'd jog a little and walk, and he got the ribbon.
Some of that fine print of track and field that y'all probably needed to know about. Pace yourself a little bit. Great story. And you also mentioned you had a neat story about Robert in basketball as well.
Yeah. We were playing Salem when I was in the 12th grade, and Yogi Clark was our coach. He had took Ansel Martin's place as coach. And we really did like him. He knew a lot about basketball, and he was just a winner. And our starting 5 that year was the guards were Arliss, Stubbs, and me. And the forwards were Robert Hamilton and Troy Sarton. And center was Don Gillihan. Now, Don Gillihan was really the best player on the team by far. Mm-hmm. He was just our cogwheel, and we knew to feed him the ball. And if we could get him under the basket and get the ball to him, he was going to be dangerous. He'd score or get a foul called on him, and he's good at free throw shooting. So we had a pretty good team built around Robert. So Salem comes down to Melbourne to play us. It's early in the season. We didn't yet know how good we were or were not, but we thought we were pretty good, but we didn't know just how good. And Salem comes down, and they've got this young guy, E.G. Bishop was his name. And he was a 12th grader, just like I was. I'd known him. Somehow I'd met him, I guess playing baseball or something. I knew he was good. But anyway, he was one of these guys that was going to shoot the ball when he got it in his hands. Mm-hmm. And he was going to shoot it no matter where he was. If he was hot and he was on, you wouldn't have a hard time beating him. But if he wasn't, you wouldn't have too much trouble beating him because he'd miss a lot of shots and you get the ball. So he comes across center line the first thing, and he throws it up there, and there's nothing but net. Boy, I looked over at Arliss Stubbs, and I said, "We're going to have to get on him, both of us, I guess." And Arliss said, "I'll try him." Said, "You just go stay where you are. I'll take him on when he crosses that line next time." Well, of course, Bishop went around him fast and shot again and made it. And it was just that way the whole game. He ended up making 76 points. And that was before the 3-point shot.
Sure, yeah. And
they beat us in overtime, 101-99. He made one on the buzzer and broke the tie, and they beat us 101-99.
They needed all of those points, didn't they?
He made 77 or 76. Wow. I've got the Melbourne Times cutting of that game that tells about that. I've got proof of it, so I don't have to tell it, and people think it doesn't sound like a true thing, but it was. 2 or 3 weeks later, we're going to Salem to play them again. And Coach, he said, "Now, boys, we're going to go up and play them, and we may not beat them." But he said, "Bishop is just not going to make no 70-something points.
He's not going to beat us.
He's not going to do it." Mm-hmm. I said, "Well, tell me how to guard him, and I sure will." But I said, "I've tried it once, and I failed." And he said, "Well, we're going to practice." And he said, I'm going to let you play like you're Bishop. And every time we're going to run the clock in practice. Every time you shoot it, if it's around the goal anywhere, we're going to count it 2 points. Because if it was Bishop shooting, it would be. So we're just going to see how it looks, and we're going to try to learn some things. So we practiced that away for 2 or 3 days. Well, we go up there, and Bishop is not as hot as he was the first game. He ends up making 20-something points. I don't know exactly how much, but it's 20-something. And we were just nip and tuck ball game the whole thing. We'd be ahead of them a point, and they'd be ahead of us 2 or 3 points, and it was just rock and roll. So it come right down to the last few seconds, and Yogi calls time, and they're ahead of us 1 point. They're ahead of us 66 to 65. And mine and Arliss's job was always, when they collapsed on Gillihan, to try to make a shot out and pull them off of Gillihan so they'd open it up for him. And he looked at me right in the face and he said, Paul Gray, you're going to have to make one of them set shots. And he looked at Arliss and he said, if he ain't open, you try it. So we had like seconds on the clock. We come across the center line and I stopped to shoot, and just as soon as I did, there's a Salem Greyhound right in my face. I looked out of my corner of my eye and I saw old Robert Hamilton standing over there on the right wing, wide open. And all I could do is throw it to him and hope. And if he didn't shoot that thing and it went through the net as the buzzer went off, we won the game 67 to 66. One of my good friends, old Mert Watson, went to all the ball games. And I saw him in the pool hall a day or two after that, and he said, well, he said, I want to tell you what, Paul Gray said, the best game I've ever seen played, Melbourne Bearcats, was that first game when they come down here and beat us. And he said, the next best game I've ever seen was Thursday night when you guys beat them on the buzzer.
What a couple of ball games. You had some really tough teams to deal with here inside Izard County, didn't you?
Mount Pleasant had an awfully good basketball team, and so did Oxford. The Oxford Cats, both of those schools had better teams than us, but not by a large margin. The other 2 schools were Calico Rock Pirates and Valley Hill Coyotes. Mm-hmm. Well, Calico Rock had a guy named Bill Lucy. Bill and I were always good friends and still were until he died. He was a great basketball player. Valley Hill had another guy that was an awfully good friend of mine. His name was Gleghorn. He and I went to college together at Arkansas State Teachers and played basketball on the freshman team for a while till we gave up and quit. But anyway, Oxford had Laverne Garner, who later on in college led the nation in average points per game, 36 points a ball game. He made All-American small team. He wasn't but about 5 feet 8 inches tall. But the only way to guard him was just try to scare him to death, because he's going to go around you if you got too close. If you didn't get close enough, he'd shoot it over you and he'd go through the net. We'd go down to Mount Pleasant and play them, and they had a guy named Thompson. Anyway, he was probably the best basketball player in the county. Later on, he went to the University of Arkansas and started 3 or 4 years on their main team. He was about 6'7", and a smooth player. He was a real good kid. Everybody liked him. Mm-hmm. Anyway, we go down there, and of course, we had a lot of different plays up our sleeve. Yogi Clark was a really smart coach. And we had some things we was going to try to do to him, and thought we might have a chance to stay with him. Well, we had Don Gillihan guarding Thompson behind him, and he had Arlie Stubbs and I to take. We would swap about. One of us would stay in front of Thompson all the time, and the other would try to guard the guards out front. We kind of had him bothered a little bit, but the game was just really close all the way through. Because Don Gillihan was scoring a lot of points on the other end, and some of us others made a few points. I'm not sure how many we all made. But anyway, it was a close ball game. But late in the game, Don Gillihan fouled out trying to guard Thompson. And when he did, we had another guy about Don's height that was a substitute, but he was the only really tall guy we had besides Don. Yogi, he called timeout, and he put this boy in place of Don. Told him to stay behind Thompson and us to keep doing what we was doing to him, try to keep him from just beating us by himself. First thing this guy did when we got the ball, he told Arliss and I to try to freeze the ball out front best we could. And we were doing a pretty good job of it, but they got to crowding us with, double teaming us and things. And so our center came out and he was open, so we threw him the ball. First thing he did was turn around and try to shoot a hook shot, and he didn't even hit the backboard. And Yogi calls timeout. And he talks to this guy, and he said, now, you're going to think you're open out there when you get that ball. But he said, now, you're not going to be open, so don't shoot it. So just throw it to Darius or to Arliss or Paul Gray one, too, if you can. So first thing happened, they started crowding Arliss and I again, and one of us threw him the ball again, the center. He tried another hook shot from out past the circle. And, of course, it barely hit the backboard this time, but it didn't even get close to the goal. So Yogi calls time out again. And I think he's going to put someone in his place. But we had nobody even close to that height. And I guess he just decided he was going to do the best he could with him. He told him, he said, whatever you do, Paul Gray, don't throw him the ball. And I said, well, I guess I can peel it and eat it, but I don't know what else to do. So Arliss and I, somehow or another, we kept them off of us for a few seconds and ended up beating them 1 point.
Wow.
And that just shocked the whole county. And so some of the mamas got a deal made up, took up some money around town, and they fed us a steak dinner in the lunchroom one night, had a banquet for us over that one ball game. And so
you didn't have too many steak dinners back in the day. I mean, that was a big deal.
I don't think I'd ever eat one before. Anyway, then we're playing Oxford. Well, first of all, 2 weeks later, Mount Pleasant comes from Melbourne, and of course they beat us this time. Not bad, but they beat us. And so Oxford had beat us already pretty bad, and somehow or another, I don't really remember the details of that game like I do Mount Pleasant, but we play Oxford at home, and somehow we beat them just barely in a ball game. They were much better than us. Garner wasn't all they had. They had a guy named Charles McCoach, and let's see, they had one of the Sherrills boys was on their main team. They had 5 good players and a sub or 2 that could play. They could really play basketball. But we beat them 1 game. I think we beat Calico Rock both times, and we beat Violet Hill both times. So we had a pretty good record. We went down to Sydney and beat Sydney that year. Sydney still had a school back then. I think we go down to Deshay. And I was off that night. I couldn't have thrown it in the ocean. And Yogi kept telling me, he said, you go ahead and shoot, you'll go find it after a while. And I never did. And they beat us. Not very bad, but they beat us. Well, they come to Melbourne later on, and we were all on, and we beat them about 20 points. But in order to go straight to the state, you had to win the district, first place. And we drew Viola, and the tournament was at Viola. And Viola had as good a team, maybe better than Oxford or Mount Pleasant, either one. They just weren't in our county. But we had played them. We had played them on our regular schedule, and they had beaten us. And we drew them in that district tournament. And so we bit the dust the first game out. I learned an awful lot about Yogi. And later on, when I coached myself, I used some of his tactics. I picked out the ones I thought I wanted to use and use them. The ones I didn't think that fit me good, I didn't use those. But he helped without trying to, he made me a better coach.
We're going to talk a bit more about, we're going to talk about a young lady by the name of Treva Tomlinson that would soon enter Paul Gray Miller's life. And we have a lot more ground to cover, so we want you to stay here. This is Home Folks, our very special guest, Paul Gray Miller. More coming up in a moment. Lots more of our conversation with Paul Gray Miller here on Home Folks coming up shortly. Right now, I want to remind you, I really appreciate it when you do business with our Home Folks partners. Sonia Hames-Wiles Family Dentistry, 410 Court Street in Melbourne. For your next appointment, call 870-368-6666. Sharp County Outdoors, 587 Highway 62 West in Ash Flat. Specializing in sales and repair of used tractors, equipment, ATVs, and UTVs. Triple M Discount in Miller Poultry and Cattle. Your go-to for silk flowers, cemetery arrangements, hardware, tools, home decor, fresh eggs, and locally raised beef. 2412 East Main Street in Melbourne. And by Izard County Abstract, with an office full of names you know and trust. Miller, Rush, Caraway, Morris, Watson, and more, serving you since 1954. It's Home Folks. I'm Ken Loggins. We're back here with Paul Gray Miller, our very special guest. So you're playing all this ball. You got to have a social life. I mean, you got to have that. And I want to know at what point Treva Tomlinson all of a sudden arrives on your radar.
Well, I'd known Treva since I was 6 years old and she was 5. A gal named Janet Tomlinson was her first cousin. And Janet was kin to me because her mother was a Marchant and my mother was a Marchant.
Okay.
So we were kin. But Treva and I weren't kin. And we were small. I was 5, I was 6 and she was 5. And Janet, at their house in town here, they had it must have been Easter Sunday. I don't know. This is pretty foggy because I was just small, but I remember exactly the first time I ever saw Treva was at Janet's house, and a bunch of the family, the Tomlinson family, which a lot of folks were there, and my sisters, of course, I'm sure they were there, and we all went out to the spring here that was later on feeding the Melbourne at city water, the Arnold Spring, we called it. Mm-hmm. We all went out there, and I guess we must have hidden eggs and honey farm or something. I don't remember what the detail was, but she and I, of course, being about the same age, we were played together all day with all the others, and that's the first time I really knew her.
So she was always around, when you were growing up.
Yeah.
At what point does this blossom into a romance?
Well, what happened was probably her best friend was Kay Perryman. Mm-hmm. Her dad was superintendent of the school at Melbourne High. My sisters and my mother and I lived across the street from Kay and her parents. Well, Mr. Perryman moved to Melbourne when I was in about the 8th grade. I remember the first time I saw Kay. I'd rode my bicycle downtown for something. I was riding back, and I ran into this girl. I'd never seen her before. And she was probably 5th grade, I guess, or 4th grade. I'm not real sure, but she was just walking along there, and I thought, well, I don't know her. And, it was a small town. We knew everybody in town, 300 population of Melbourne. And so I just stopped on my bicycle and started talking to her, and she told me who she was. And Uncle Bob Harris was where they were staying right then. Most people don't know who that was, but the house is still there. It's just been made over. When you go up the hill toward where we lived, of course, that was a gravel road then. Mm-hmm. And we talked to them, and I thought she seemed real friendly, nice, And, well, she and Treva became best friends. And so I dated Kay some. Kay and I were such good friends, we'd kind of have a date if we didn't have one with somebody else. That's kind of the way it was with us. And we were awfully good friends, and we double dated a lot. And Don Gillihan one of my best friends dated Treva. So we had what they called a junior-senior graduation banquet, and our class was graduating. Mr. Perryman wouldn't let us have a dance, at all, and my Uncle J.C. Miller was on the school board. And so we had a class meeting. The 12th grade had a class meeting. We were a tight bunch. We had class meetings, and we put on a lot of plays, and we're still friends to this day. Anyway, the other class members decided they would elect me to go talk to Uncle J.C. because they thought maybe I might talk him into letting us have a dance. Never had one.
Okay.
At school. So I go down to the store, and he always sits back there at his desk in the back of the room. I go in and sit down there, and we yeah around a little while about basketball and everything, sports. And after a while, I said, Uncle J.C., what would you think about it if our class wanted to sponsor and have a dance after our junior-senior banquet up here? He said, well, thunder, I wouldn't be for that. I said, well, I thought you might be if we'd just have a sock hop. We'd put our shoes off and wouldn't damage the floor or anything. And we could have Coach Clark, riding herd overs, and you know how pretty strict he is and everything. I could tell he's beginning to warm up a little bit. And so
that was the start of your career as a lobbyist.
Yeah. So anyway, I left him, and my job was, Mother hadn't learned to drive yet, but she had a car, and so I'd take her everywhere. And she was working in the courthouse as secretary of the draft board. Mm-hmm. So I went on over there, and I was talking to her, and I said, our class and the junior classes wanting to have a sock hop in the gym after our banquet. So Mother said, well, son, you know how Uncle J.C. is with you. And she said, if he'll do it for anybody, he'll do it for you. And she said, I believe if you go down there and just kind of try to get his sympathy, you might get it. She said, if you just go in there and tell him, what I want to do, and surely he'll let you, she said, that may not do it. And I said, well, all right. So I go back down the next afternoon after school's out and sit down with him. And I said, you know what I mentioned to you about us having a sock hop? And he said, oh, a sock hop? And I said, yeah. He said, I thought I didn't understand. You really pull your shoes off? And I said, yeah, well, we won't allow anybody on that court. Of course, that old gymnasium was mostly splinters anyway. That was the last year we had basketball in that gym. Mm-hmm. And so he gave in and let us have that sock hop. So we had I had Mother's car, and we had double dates. I was dating Kay for the sock hop, and Don was dating Treva. Well, we've got pictures in the yearbook, and I've got pictures of us dancing, and we was all having a big time. And Don eases over me and whispers, and he said, let's just swap them when we go out just to see what they'll do. And I said, well, okay, I don't care. I said, I doubt if Kay would care. And he said, let's just see how they act. And I said, okay, that'd be fine with me. So when the dance is over and we're all leaving, we all started to the car, and I got Treva by the elbow and guided her to the front passenger seat. I opened the door, and she kind of giggled and got him to sit down. And so Don and Kate got in the back seat, and I get under the wheel, and I drive around a little while. So I'm thinking, I don't know if this could turn into anything serious or not, but I always liked Treva, but we just never had thought about dating. So what I do, I take and I let Don out to he's staying with his grandparents. I take him out there and take him home. And he looks around in there at Treva, and I think he said he'd see her tomorrow or something, and Treva kind of frowned. Of course, she done got her feelings hurt because he swapped her off. Mm-hmm. I had no idea. But anyway, we took Kay home then. So I took Treva out to Zion. She was staying with her aunt and uncle. And I walked her to the door, and I said, well, I'll see you tomorrow night. And she said, okay. From then on, we studied, and a year later we got married. Slipped away and got married and told it about 2 or 3 weeks after we did.
A couple of things are blowing my mind right now. You got the first dance ever at Melbourne High School done. Your lobbying of JC. And second of all, things got serious with you and Treva just because of let's trade, see what happens, you know?
Just a flaky deal.
Isn't that amazing?
It's amazing. Treva had talked to her mom and dad. See, they were living in Wichita, and he was working at Boeing Aircraft. Mm-hmm. And, of course, Treva had got to be in the 10th grade, and I'm not sure. I think she stayed with one of her uncle and aunts when she was in the 10th grade. I'm sure she did. Well, her parents had let her do that because she wanted to go to Melbourne school so bad and play basketball and all of her friends and everything. Mm-hmm. She had gone to school in Wichita, and I can remember her telling about who she would name her friends, those girls that were friends up there in Wichita. You know, she went to a huge school up there. And she would talk about that sometimes. So, you know, I'd like to see whatever happened to old so-and-so and all that, you know, but we never did. We went to Wichita and lived up there, but she didn't try to look any of those up. Of course, figured it'd been impossible. But anyway, we were talking about it one night, and I was in college. I come home every weekend, you know, so I could be with her and all my friends. We were talking about school was fixing to be, the term was fixing to be over, and she was fixing to have to go to Wichita for the summer and stay because she was graduating. So she was talking to her mother. They came down from Wichita, and I don't know exactly why they came or what was going on otherwise, but Treva told them, said, I want to go to state teacher where Paul's going. Well, her mother told her, said, well, you're not going to go to any more school down here. We're not going to let you stay away from us another year. Mm-hmm. Said, you're going home with us, and said, you can go to college out at Wichita State. Well, Treva tells me this, and she said, that'll be the end of our romance, because said, you're going to be at Conway, and you're going to meet all them girls down there, and I'll be in Wichita. I said, yeah, it ain't going to work too good.
Yeah, Wichita these days is a lot closer than it was back then.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
That's like that's on the other side of the world.
That's right.
Back then, yeah.
And so anyway, she finally, what we did, we eloped. Mm-hmm. And
lots of people did especially
before
back in the day.
We did, Don Lawrence and Ann Fudge eloped, real good friends of ours. I was kin to Don, and Treva was kin to Ann. And Kay Perryman and Rayburn Richardson eloped. And see, that was our best friends, mm-hmm. just about. I had other best friends, Treva did too, but we were real close with all of them. We got to talking to Don and Ann, and they're telling us how they pulled it off. So we went the same route. Now, John, my uncle, was the county clerk, and that's where you bought your marriage license. And I said, well, Uncle John, now, I know we're real close friends, but I can't go in there and buy my license from him because he'll know he can't tell my mother. But if he does tell her, he's going to make me mad, upset me. But if he don't tell her, she's going to be mad at him. So I can't buy them from him. And Don said, well, you can buy them over in Sharp County where I bought mine. So I traveled to Sharp County. I'm 18 years old. The Treva's 17. And bought marriage license for us. And Don and Ann had got married in Batesville. This brother E.P.J. Garrett, an elderly man that was a real nice fellow. And he had preached in our church before, a visitor, preached. And so they went, and he married them in his home down there. And so we did the same route. We went down and he married us in his home in the living room. And we've had pictures taken of us in front of that house. It's still there. Some folks have renovated it, and they still live in it. Mm-hmm. And we have pictures taken of us when we were out in Batesville in front of the front entrance to it.
So Paul Gray and Treva get hitched. It won't be long till kids come along, careers come along. We have a lot more ground to cover on part 2 of our very special visit with Paul Gray Miller. We'll talk about his career as a coach, traveling salesman, business owner, state senator. You can throw in pilot too. It's all coming up on part 2 of our Paul Gray Miller visit here on Home Folks. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll chat with you again soon.